On day 1 of our canyoneering trip to Northwash, we had just finished a canyon called Hogwarts when we found out from Danny that our next canyon called Merry Piglet was almost directly across the street. The challenge for this approach was going to be that all the way through Hogwarts the temperature had been increasing steadily and now we were in the hottest part of the day. Almost as soon as you step off the highway, you're going to begin a rock scramble up towards the top. After climbing over and around boulders for a bit, you should find yourself at a 12 to 14 foot tall slab. The climb isn't too difficult, and if you have any rock climbing experience at all, it should probably be pretty simple for you. However, if you're not a strong climber, you can do what we did here and have the most experienced one in the group climb up to the top and then send a hand line down. After you get to the top of the slab, you are going to make a left and you will actually be crossing over the technical section of Merry Piglet. This is where the climb is going to kick into high gear. You're not going to be doing anything super technical, but it is steep and relentless. The entire canyon is only somewhere between 1.25 miles and 1.5 miles. Sometimes it's hard to get an accurate GPS reading when you're down in the canyons. Over the course of the fairly short approach, you will be gaining 420 feet. And if you go on a day as hot as this one, that 420 feet can be pretty miserable. You are definitely going to want to wear shoes that give you a lot of traction. This section of the climb gets pretty steep and you definitely don't want to go sliding down. Luckily, with this being sandstone, it will supply you with a little bit of grip on its own. Once you reach the top of the climb, you should get a really nice view of the valley below, and you should even be able to see the last couple of rappels from Hogwart Canyon, which is where we came from. We also found a couple of spots where you can get some shade and take a rest from that beast of a climb. But the rest was short-lived and soon we were on the move again. The good thing is that once you reach this shelf, it is a pretty simple walk over to the technical section, with the exception of one more small climb. As you make your way about 900 feet down the shelf, the technical section should start to appear on your right. Please note that this video was shot in the beginning of June and this canyon was completely dry at the time. If you visit during the rainy months, you can have chest-deep waters and even swimmers in certain areas. As we arrived at the first rappel, Kelly decided that he wanted to err on the side of caution and tie himself in as a backup. There is a small shelf at the bottom and you probably want to head off to the left or you will end up in a tree like Danny did here. This rappel is right around 60 feet and has a little bit of a tricky start because it almost immediately goes into a free hang. After you get past the start, this one should be pretty simple and fun. The way that the rocks are formed make it appear that the start of Rappel 1 is a waterfall during the wet season. If this is flowing, I don't think that it would be safe to be in the canyon, but it sure would be pretty to look at. One by one, our group slowly made their way down, avoiding that big tree at the bottom. Once everyone was down, it was time to pack up and head over to Rappel 2. This rappel is located about 200 feet down the canyon. There are a couple of small down climbs that you will encounter along the way, but nothing is too tricky. As you make your way down the last down climb, you should see a tree with some webbing around it. This is the anchor for Rappel 2. The last down climb before Rappel 2 seemed a tiny bit sketchy just because you're a little bit high up and there's not a whole lot to grab onto, but luckily if you slide down you can jump down right into the soft sand. Rappel 2 is a lot shorter and narrower than the first rappel, and it ends up dropping you down right around 25 feet. This is probably one of the easiest rappels in this canyon and you should breeze right through it. This is definitely one of the spots where you will encounter water if you come during the wet season. But since there was no water in sight on this trip, it was just a matter of squeezing our way through the nearly 150 foot long canyon on the way to Rappel 3. Eventually the canyon walls will open up, and after a short 15 foot down climb, you'll have another 130 foot walk to the top of the next rappel. This is another short 25 foot rappel that happens in 2 stages. At first it starts off with a pretty tight squeeze between the canyon walls, but eventually it flares out towards the bottom. Some more experienced canyoneers might be tempted to try to down climb this, but be careful because when it does flare out, it would be pretty tricky and you might have to jump down the last 8 feet. After Rappel 3, you will encounter more down climbs and narrow canyon walls as you make your way 280 feet down the canyon to Rappel 4. At right around 65 feet, this is one of the tallest and trickiest rappels of this canyon. You will need to stem your way down to this choke stone before you can get on the rope. It's probably a good idea to have more experienced canyoneers stay up at the top and run a hand line down so the less experienced canyoneers can use that to get down to the anchor. Besides the awkward start and the fact that it's pretty narrow, this one's pretty easy, and this rappel is back to back with Rappel 5. This 40-foot rappel is anchored to a choke stone, and during the wet season will drop you down into a chest-deep pool. Besides the fact that this one is narrow, there really isn't anything else about this that is overly challenging. You will, however, have to be very careful when throwing rope bags or backpacks down because they can get stuck way up in the narrow crack. It is just a short walk over from Rappel 5 to Rappel 6. This rappel will have you dropping down about 50 feet into yet another narrow slot. I have read that if you are very skilled, you can down climb this one, but our entire group rappelled it. This one is more of a vertical drop than Rappels 4 and 5, so it is quite a bit easier in my opinion. This is the last decently big sized rappel of this canyon, but you still have one more short one before you head back to the car. The walk to the final rappel is about 500 feet down the canyon. This is the longest walk that you'll be taking on the technical portion of Merry Piglet. One of the nice things about this canyon is that it finishes so close to the car, you should be able to see the road from the top of the final rappel. Speaking of final rappel, here we are at it. This is a very short 20-foot drop where we built a rock current anchor and then secured that by running the rope around the rock horn. This one does have just a tiny bit of an awkward start because you have to slide down into this little pocket. And you also have to avoid yet another bush at the bottom, which Danny is always good at displaying how to end up right in the middle of. If you don't feel like doing this final rappel, you can climb back down the slab that we climbed up on the way in. If you're facing the road, the slab should be to the left of the final rappel. But either way you go, once you're down, it is a very short walk back. And now for the standard disclaimer. Canyoneering is fun and awesome, but it can be dangerous. If you would like to try it for yourself, please be sure to take a course or at least go with someone who is highly experienced. And that's going to do it for our run through Merry Piglet. It was fun and just challenging enough to make it exciting in a couple of points. If you enjoy our adventures, be sure to subscribe and hit that bell icon so you get notified when we make new videos. Check us out on Instagram at @thatadventurelife_official. And for all the information about this and other awesome adventures, head on over to thatadventurelife.com.